Dr. James Odell, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's excellent because the topic of the day is bioregulatory medicine. It's a true passion of mine. You know, when people ask me essentially what I do, what I want to really say is I'm a bioregulatory medicine practitioner, but that people have no idea what that means. And so until we get to the point where people can better understand what that form of medicine is, or natural health or natural healing is, typically I stick with naturopath or integrative health practitioner. But I'm hoping that you and others who are experts in this field are going to be able to really push forward what this form of medicine is. So I think no better place to start than really trying to explain what bioregulatory medicine is and how, of course, can help all of our listeners here today.
Well, yes, we're trying to make at Bioregulatory Medicine Institute, we're trying to make this a household word. But you're absolutely right. If somebody asks me, what do you do? I'll say, I'm a naturopath. I do traditional Chinese medicine. Oh, but by the way, I'm also medical director of the Bioregulatory Medicine Institute. Then I have to go into this long discourse of what bioregulatory medicine actually is. Basically, I kind of got into this after I came back from China. I was invited to Switzerland by Thomas Rau, Dr. Thomas Rau, the Paracelsus Clinic in Los Moles, Switzerland. And he really was the one that introduced me to what at that time was called just biological medicine. Yes. And I realized that it was really not a lot different than traditional Chinese medicine and many of its thoughts, particularly in trying to, support the body to self-heal and do it in a natural way. But it involved a lot of high-tech diagnostics and therapeutics, which I wasn't familiar with at the time. Things like microscopy, contact regulation thermography, heart rate variability, numerous types of diagnostics like that, as well as therapeutic measures, not just only homeopathy, but frequency therapy, hyperthermia, oxidative therapies, and the like. And so this was for me just like a kid in a candy shop. I was so excited about learning all these new types of diagnostics and therapeutics. And I just stuck with it. I kept going back to Switzerland and trying to study more, and to Germany and studying more. And eventually Dr. Rau and we started doing a conference series of conferences and workshops here in the United States. And we did that for over 10 years, trying to introduce people to bioregulatory medicine. We use the word regulatory, though, to basically outline that it's important types of therapies to help the body regulate or adapt to like toxicity or stresses that they may encounter. So if we just call it biological medicine, then sometimes it gets confused. It basically gets confused with what the pharmaceutical industry, what they call biological medicine, which is very different than what we call biological medicine. So we use the word regulatory in it to really designate that we're trying to attempt to use methods that will in some way be natural to the body, that doesn't interfere with regulatory mechanisms. And what I mean by that is, like in allopathic medicine, we use a lot of anti-drugs, antibiotics, antihistamines, antipyretics, and these types of drugs in some way interfere with an enzyme or a protein, and they dysregulate the body. That's why they have side effects. So here we're looking at therapeutic measures, whether it be diet, exercise, meditation, herbs, homeopathy, a wide variety of therapeutics that are natural to the body, that don't interfere with these sensitive mechanisms that of the body and cause side effects. So that's basically what bioregulatory medicine is. It improves the body's ability to self-heal. So we call it the science of self-healing.
Absolutely. And it's working with the body to give it all the nutrients that it needs, and also nutrients that will help detox the body as well. So when we look at that, I mean, you say we're really trying to help the body create homeostasis, and we say the same thing, or basically achieve equilibrium. So the goal is the body's always in this thing that the traditional naturopaths called dynamic equilibrium. It's always in flux. And so what we're looking to do is simply say, here's the nutrients. Here's essentially the vitamins, the minerals, the amino acids, the enzymes that you spoke about that the body uses to keep itself balanced. And when it begins to run low on those, well, we have functionally low levels of those systems working. And then when there's toxicities, of course, that begins to weigh on the body as well. And then eventually we get in the disease state. And it's interesting to me because I was first introduced to bioregulatory medicine. Well, I mean, again, if you want to look at bioregulatory medicine, it's really the accumulation of thoughts from Ayurvedic medicine, TCM, like you spoke about, traditional naturopathy, which are a couple hundred years old, and obviously traditional Chinese medicine, 3,000 plus years old, Ayurveda, 5,000 plus years old. But bioregulatory medicine has not stopped. They are continuing on with the best advances in technology, like you spoke about. And that's why for you and I, I don't consider myself really a biohacker because I'm not looking to hack the body. I'm looking to work with the body. But one thing I'll say is I was introduced to this through something called Homotoxicology. And to me, that was one of the best courses I had ever taken in basically in school when I was going for my degree. And the reason I say that is for the very first time I learned that you don't just get sick. Like there's actual 4 stages in Ayurveda as well as bioregulatory medicine that show you symptoms of the infestation, essentially, the infection or the body not being able to maintain equilibrium. And then we have either an overactive or underactive attempt by the body in order to regulate or heal. And those symptoms are what we see oftentimes as the disease. And I would love to hear more from your perspective because for me, it was one of the greatest things I ever learned. I realized, well, here are the symptoms of progression. And if we know there's a progression, well, we should be able to move backwards and reverse dis-ease in the body as well.
Yes, what you're speaking of is homotoxicology, which was developed by Hans Heinrich Reckewig. And he had the idea that we were intoxicated by a poison world, basically, which is true. And these toxins, what he called homotoxins or toxins of mankind, would enter the body. And then we have forces to help to eliminate them, our eliminative organs, whether it be our lungs or our bowels or our liver or our kidneys. But in some way that we are always attempting to detoxify and eliminate these homotoxins. However, if the toxins aren't eliminated efficiently, say a person has constipation or they have some kind of impairment in one of their detoxification organs, then these toxins start to accumulate and the body will have a different way to break down the toxins. And basically that's with inflammation or reaction to the toxin. And so cytokines, histamines, these are designed to break down toxins. So it's a secondary detoxification mechanism is inflammation. Now, if inflammation isn't successful, then what the body does is it starts to in some way deposit the toxins within the extracellular matrix. That's the space between the cells, because this is like a safe depository for toxins. So it deposits them there. And over time, if we're not eliminating them, if we're not doing detoxification procedures, then they accumulate and they start to impregnate the cells. And so they after they are deposited within the extracellular matrix, they start to infest into the cells. In other words, they get through the cell membranes into the cells, and they start to disrupt the oxidative and genetic mechanisms of the cell. So this is more like impregnation of the cell. Then the cell can become degenerative or neoplastic. In other words, cancer can be produced. Or just degenerative illnesses. So this is the idea that toxins proceed and they could cause a degenerative illness. So what we're trying to always attempt to do is detoxify and push it the other way. And so Reckewig designed a variety of homeopathics, basically called Homotoxicology. And these homeopathics were mostly kind of like shotgun homeopathics. Instead of using single remedies, he would combine remedies together to create a special remedy that would help the body detoxify, depending on the stage at what that person was in. So if they were in more of a cellular stage, then he would use certain types of homotoxicology, or if they were in more of a mesenchymal or early stage, then he would use a different type of approach. So the homotoxicology is front and center to what a lot of biological regulatory medicine doctors think about. And they're always looking at the patient, of course, individually and uniquely, and trying to figure out at what stage they are. Are they in an early stage of toxification, or are they in a later stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to link up today the actual homotoxicology chart and a couple other previous podcasts on this for people that are interested in learning how the body doesn't just essentially get autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, Hashimoto's. It just doesn't come out of anywhere. So there's an actual predictable timeline that your body moves through. And yes, genetics matter to a degree, meaning like, well, okay, that's within the genetic code. But what we have to do is we have to experience those functional deficiencies or toxicities in order for those genetics to express themselves in the first place. And the speed at which that you get these diseases has to do with toxicity deficiencies and some genetic predispositions as well. Would you agree with that, or do you have a different take on?
Absolutely agree with that. What you said is very, very true. Another thing that we're thinking of is basically there's different levels of the human. And most conventional medicine is working at a structural or physical level. And so in viewing that, they may look at the body through in a surgical way. So they're actually, is there a tumor? Is there something visible? So through scopes and scans, they're looking at the body in a physical or structural way. And then if there's a problem, then they may surgically try to remove it. As a functional medicine doctor, you know that we go beyond that within the terms of functional medicine and start looking at how the body actually works, the biochemical processes, the genetic and genomic processes of the body. And then there's another level of it. It's an energetic level. And this is where we get into the traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. And here we're talking about like meridian systems and chakras and the what we think of as the energetic body. Primarily working with meridians and points and understanding the interrelationship of the body, both physically and non-physically. Then there's also, of course, the psycho-emotional part, which is a very important component. And we can't really separate the physical from the non-physical in this way, but psycho-emotional stresses, traumas, things that have happened to us are very important to consider when we're looking at the body diagnostically or therapeutically. And then we also have the social issues. Of course, right now with COVID, a lot of our social activities have been blocked. And, we have social distancing, which I call non-social distancing. But this is a problem that people are social creatures and they need to communicate with each other and feel love and feel that they're connected to one another. And if not, then this could create disease as well. And we have environmental factors too that play into it. Of course, environmental medicine is a big part of this. But in other words, we're looking at all of these things, the structural, the functional, the energetic, the psycho-emotional, the social, the environmental. And we have to take into account all of that. It's not just physical, like you would see in conventional medicine. So we're trying to get our arms around it all and understand the human in a unique and very personalized way.
Absolutely. I'd love you to be able to talk a little bit too about the different devices used more, I would say, more so in Germany and Switzerland and in Europe rather than in the United States. But what are some of these diagnostic techniques that really go beyond a lot of the functional medicine lab work that I speak about all the time? Because there is so much more to the human, as you spoke about. Some of these things are easier to ascertain than others. And medical science is actually showing us something that actually looks like the exact meridian points spoken about as the Marma points in Ayurveda, and of course the meridian points in traditional Chinese medicine from many thousands of years ago. And medical science now is trying to figure out how did they know when they didn't have this ability to even understand the inner workings of the body, but they did at a much deeper level. And again, from an energetic level, and in our Western-based mentality, we often have a very difficult time accepting this and understanding it because we can't see it. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to. Before I get into the energetics, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the functional side of it. And one of the diagnostics that I really like a lot is what's called contact regulation thermography. And this is a probe that touches the skin and it measures the temperature. And what we can do is, and it's been used for over 20 years, contact regulation thermography. But what we can do with it is we could measure about 116 areas all over the body. And then the person removes their clothes down to their underthings, stands in a room for about 10 minutes and cools down. Then the technician goes back in and measures those same exact areas again. Now, these areas overlie organs, glands, and tissues. So, for example, it may overlie the thyroid gland or the thymus gland or the sinuses or the heart, lungs, or whatever. And normally the body should thermal regulate. And so we're always looking at regulation as a measurement of function. And if it normally it should cool down in the body, but heat up in the head. But if it's not doing that, then it means there's some kind of problem. So all of this information goes into the computer, and the computer analyzes this information and tells the technician which areas are blocked, which areas are not thermally regulating, which gives us kind of a global picture of what organs, glands, and tissues aren't working. This is an excellent diagnostic for breast disease. It's often an early diagnostic, earlier than mammography. So again, mammography is a structural technique, whereas this is more of a functional technique. But getting back into what you've asked about the energetic side of it, in Chinese medicine and even in Ayurvedic medicine and Tibetan medicine, they often would just feel the pulses, right? And in order to determine the energetics of the body. Feel the pulses, look at the tongue, ask questions and the like, and they would get an idea of the meridian system and which meridians were working and not working. Well, as far as back as the 1930s and 40s, they started doing what's called electrodermal screening and looking at the conduction of the body as a way to determine the energetics. And they found that by measuring certain points, like at the fingertips, that they could determine if there is some kind of blockage or impedance within the meridian system. This advanced, and there's many companies now that produce instrumentation. Some of it is like Vega, where it's like a 1 point measurement, and it takes maybe an hour or two for a person to go through and to measure many different things within the body, the organs, glands, tissues, and the like, and how things are working, but also the meridian system. But this is, in other words, it's a way of looking at conduction of the body to determine the health status. So it's a very intriguing and interesting area that has opened up this energetic side. There's also other types of machines that can look into the body from more of a perspective of resonances and frequencies. And these types of machines are also used in Europe and in different types of hospitals in Europe, though you don't really see them so much here. But definitely energetic medicine has become, has fruited, and it's very much a part of biological regulatory medicine, together with the psycho-emotional side of it.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. A lot of people ask me for recommendations on a good bioelectrical impedance analysis-based device that can measure water composition, other attributes of the body in terms of cellular osmosis. And I know actually both of us were just at the World Medicine conference out in Germany, the World Bioregulatory Medical Conference. And they had a lot of different devices there, many of which I'm not as familiar with. I know both of us use a nice big electron microscope in our office. It allows us to do dark field, light field, all sorts of different, looking at not just the cells themselves, which is important, but just like you spoke about the interstitial milieu and actually looking at what's going on within the cells, how quickly they degrade, break down. And we can talk about that for sure. I mean, I'd love to, but I want to answer a lot of people's questions on an area because I simply don't use the devices that much. So what are your thoughts on some of the best devices out there and for BIA and or similar? And do you use one yourself?
Well, I'm a Vega person, a VEGA. I think that it's hard to find something as good as Vega. Vega is out of Germany, and they make a wide variety of devices. Some of them are therapeutic and some of them are diagnostic. But I think that company is worth looking into. Biocom, B-I-O-C-O-M, C-O-M, is also a very good company, and they make excellent machines for diagnostics and therapeutics. So when I talk about the therapeutics, what they're doing is they're maybe diagnosing a certain frequency that is perhaps toxic, and then they could in some way invert that frequency and give it back to the body and try to detoxify that frequency. So it's really become quite advanced, and I think that these types of machines are really very, very useful. Unfortunately, in the United States, they've been sort of blacklisted, and it's kind of hard to find training and find information about them. So you usually, to really get good training on them, you have to go to Europe pretty much and go to one of the companies or find a reputable teacher to learn about it. And it takes time to learn. I mean, to do Vega testing, I would say it could take a year or more easily to really get the technique down and to learn about it. So a lot of people aren't committed enough to really learn that. They want to shortcut it. So there are machines that are sort of automatic machines that a person could be hooked up to, and that will scan the body and then give a printout. And those machines, I think, are useful as maybe screening tools, but you still have to back it up with laboratory information or other types of diagnostics. You can't just use that machine as a solo diagnostic. That would be not good medicine.
I completely agree. And I don't think that anyone getting into this field should really look for the shortcuts. Like, that is more of a biohacking thing. Like, hey, what's the neurotransmitter or precursor or whatever I can take? But that's a form of green medicine that, we've both spoken about before, that can actually lead to more harm than good as well, since the body is it's an intricate, but it's a balanced machine. And if you put too much in, even of a good thing or a good nutritional supplement, whatever it might be, well, that can begin to actually cause a deficiency. For example, put in too much copper, it drops zinc down. Put in too much zinc, it drops copper down. Put in too much calcium, it drops magnesium. So you have to look at it as like, okay, well, what's the balance of these things? And maybe you actually do need a higher amount. I mean, many people need more magnesium or they need more zinc right now, but maybe not for 2 years straight. Maybe they need a little bit more at a higher dosage for 3 to 4 months, and then they can go back to a normal ratio. And so that's why it's important. Like you said, these machines are a tool that a practitioner can use, but it's the practitioner's intake of the actual patient or wellness client, along with other diagnostic-based models to really help. But when I say diagnostic, I mean we're not diagnosing disease, we're diagnosing and really looking at imbalances within the body, which can then lead to a imbalanced state.
Yes.
And one thing I just wanted to mention too, and I would love your feedback on is, so the contact regulation, I think you called it contact regulation thermography. So I've used whole body thermography or partial thermography, and I recommend that to women over a mammogram. Again, I'm not giving medical advice out here, but a mammogram comes with radiation. And there's actually clinical studies right now, and of course, you know this and wrote the book on it, which we'll talk about later. But there's a time and place for everything in conventional medicine. And maybe some women do need a mammogram. However, if there's no, especially pre-existing history in families and no lumps have been found or anything like that, to do essentially a preventative-based mammogram, to me, I don't know that that's the first step I would take and give for recommendations in my family, my mom, my wife, et cetera. But thermography, and again, I have not heard of the contact, so I want to learn more about that. But how do you feel about thermography, which essentially it's looking at the different heat patterns within the body and can give you actually a really good sense of, is there a blockage there? Might there be a tumor or something else?
Yes, exactly. That thermography, there's two types. There's infrared thermography, which you're talking about,
yes,
and where it's actually a picture of the body. And so within the picture, there's colors. The blue would represent cold and the red would represent hot. And so you're looking for hot spots, particularly like for the breast, hot spots in the breast. And this is a very good diagnostic. And it's in the same way contact thermography does this too. It's just not a picture, it's a graphic. And so you're measuring points all over the body. So it gives you a little bit more of a global look at it. And also you're challenging the body with cold, and in order to get a reaction. And that's why we think of it as regulation thermography. We're looking at the body and how does it regulate to a temperature change. So it becomes a little bit more of a functional tool than just a snapshot in time. But both infrared thermography and contact thermography are excellent early tools to diagnose imbalances in disease processes, or early disease processes in the body. As far as mammography, I think that it does have its risk. And over time, that radiation is cumulative. And usually doing a mammography, mammogram, that if there's some kind of problem, then they'll ask to do an ultrasound. Well, ultrasounds are safe. There's no radiation involved. But the gold standard of a structural image is really an MRI. And so a breast MRI is one of the most definitive and best test for looking at the breast or at the body structurally. And unfortunately, right now they're a little expensive. I send sometimes people up to Chicago to get an MRI, like a breast MRI, for $300, which is very reasonable. So the price is coming down. And I think it's going to be more and more the gold standard, or the standard in which conventional medicine will take. Right now, there's unfortunately just a lot of hospitals and clinics have invested in mammogram equipment, and so they use it. But over time, I think that you're going to see that will be changed to either ultrasounds or MRIs, and that also using regulation thermography or infrared thermography as a diagnostic for breast disease.
And we know that there's radiation, obviously, with any type of X-ray, and that's really what we're looking at with a mammogram. And we know how sensitive the breast tissue is, as well as prostate tissue, to any type of radiation. So as you said, maybe it's one time, or maybe it's cumulative if you go every 5 years, whatever it might be. But there's some type of inherent risk. With an MRI, do you know of any risks related to that? Because as you said, an ultrasound, it's more, I would say, EMF based, although much less, of course. But what about an MRI? What would the side effects be?
I really don't see the side effects of an MRI, nor do I see the side effects of an ultrasound. Not unless with MRI was used with some kind of contrasting agent. That would be different. If you're injecting MRI with contrast, like they do, for certain types of organs, then the contrast certainly has potential side effects. but just the MRI, magnetic resonance and magnetic field, it's not going to shake up the electrons of the body too much. And I don't see it as a danger. It's certainly not a danger like radiation and the radioactive diagnostics that are out there. By far, one of the strongest is the CAT scans. That a CAT scan has a lot of radiation involved in it. And so anytime you can get an MRI over a CAT scan, you want to do so just to prevent that radiation exposure.
That makes sense. And I think that's good advice. So what I'd like to do now is I'd love to be able to talk more about the basis of healing and self-healing, which goes back to a very old debate of the germ theory versus the cell theory, and essentially how bioregulatory medicine, a lot of these natural healing modalities have come about. They really challenge. So if you want to get down to the basis of conventional medicine, well, they use the germ theory. And if you want to talk about natural healing, well, we're talking about the cell theory. So I'd love to hear you explain this. I've actually listened to one of your seminars that you've given before on this particular topic. And it was one that, again, I don't think I got into this until about maybe 10, 11 years ago, like truly looking at the difference between how we get sick versus innate versus outside. So let's have you go through that.
Okay, well, we have these two ideas, germ theory and terrain theory, or what you call cell theory. And Claude Bernard, he was also called the father of modern physiology, was one of the first to say the terrain is everything. And what he's talking about is the extracellular matrix of the body, the pH of the body, how the body, basically the network within the body that communicates to the cells and what the cells are bathed in. And that terrain, which also encompasses the microbiome terrain too, and the immunity, is a very important part of our immune system, or of our body's ability to ward off germs and viruses, or whether it be bacteria or whatever. And so later, there was this Dr. Pierre-Antoine Béchamp, and he said the primary cause of disease is always within us. It's not like we're catching a disease, and not like there's a germ that is infecting us. And so he was really the one to develop this this terrain theory out of this idea that the extracellular matrix is very, very important part of it, and the immunity and the microbiome. So what we have here are two different kind of opposing ideas, but probably the truth lies somewhere in the middle, as it always does. And so if you take COVID, yes, the people that have comorbidities, people that are older and are immune compromised, are more likely to develop some type of virus or COVID virus. And the people that are young and healthy, they rarely even have any symptoms. That's because their terrain is healthy. And so the whole idea is that we're trying to maintain our terrain in order to ward off any type of microorganism from developing within us. Now, microorganisms are complicated. We have bacteria, and bacteria can change, and they can become more virulent if they are stressed. And so, for example, if a person takes an antibiotic, most antibiotics work against the cell walls of the bacteria, so they may destroy the cell walls, and then, but they don't destroy actually the bacteria completely. So the bacteria can live on within the system, within the terrain. And if the terrain becomes corrupted and intoxicated, then that bacteria can change back to a more virulent and pathogenic form and reinfect the body. So this is to say that the terrain governs this, and that antibiotics can sometimes cause resistant infections just because they can change the bacteria into a more virulent or pathogenic form that has to be treated in conventional medicine with even stronger antibiotics. And so we're trying to move away from that and instead working with the terrain, working with the immunity and the microbiome. We know that there's good bacteria that control bad bacteria. So we use probiotics for the gut microbiome. Now we understand that just is the same thing within viruses, that most viruses, and there's trillions of viruses in our body at all times, that most viruses are harmless. And actually, there's good viruses that control bacteria and bad viruses, just like there's good bacteria that control bad bacteria. And so viruses have been given kind of a bad name here. And that not all are pathogenic, but a lot of it depends on our terrain, on our own matrix. So again, within that matrix, when we were talking about homotoxicology, we were talking about becoming more intoxicated. The more intoxicated we become, the more corrupted that matrix becomes. And the more potentially pathogenic viruses and bacteria and other microorganisms can become. So this is what Béchamp was talking about. He said everything is the terrain, that we have to look at the terrain first and try to clean the terrain, try to in some way help the body self-heal through detoxification and fortification with nutrients. You had mentioned nutrition, which is a very important part of the terrain. And pH is also a very important part of it. If the pH gets too low, with the body's not buffering acids or not eliminating acids, then the terrain becomes more and more acidic. And this can also cause organisms to become more pathogenic. So I do think that there's a lot to be said about keeping a good, healthy biological terrain in order to protect ourselves, and that it's not just all about germs and bacteria. It's also equally as much about the body's own biological terrain.
100%, without a doubt. And one of the big things, and we know this to be true, so I mean, Béchamp was certainly onto something, because we all travel on airplanes, and inevitably there's a couple people sick on that airplane, and they're spread their germs throughout the whole plane, or at least within, let's say, 14 feet, right? So those people all breathe it in. I'm one of those people. I previous to this virus, I traveled quite a bit, a couple times a month. And for the most part, I wouldn't get sick, and neither would a lot of other people on the plane, but some people would. And so we were all exposed to the same pathogen, whether it was a bacteria, virus, et cetera, yet we didn't get sick. Well, it came into our body, whatever that bacteria, pathogen, virus was, and either we already had our own antibodies made for it, or more than likely we weren't exposed to it previously, but our body was healthy enough to be able to fight it off before we got to a greater stage, which we think of as a sickness, but really it's our body's attempt to re-regulate the body, whether it be a fever, mucus production, et cetera. So we know that if it's all about the germ, well, then everybody should get sick. But they don't. And so we know that it is about the terrain, and we're dealing with right now with this particular virus. It's different than the flu-based virus. The flu-based virus, the terrain in younger people is different, right? It has to do with genes. It has to do with the immune system, and they can actually get much more sick from the flu. Whereas if you're under the age of 45 and you don't have any comorbidities, it's unlikely you'll even experience any symptoms. Or if you do, they'll be mild and only last a couple of days. And that's because this particular virus doesn't essentially hook up well with a host of younger individuals. But as you said, if there's already inflammation, if there's already a little bit of work down that path of homotoxicology, well, then that could be a much greater potential issue. So I look at it as there's definitely viruses. There are definitely germs and bacteria in the outer world, but those don't matter as much if our inner world, if our soil, I've always been taught it as, if the soil is pure, then you can grow a really strong quality plant. But try growing a healthy, strong plant in poor soil. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly. That's the difference between, being a gardener. That as a gardener, we're always looking looking at the soil. And as a physician, we try to help our patients become gardeners and nurture their soil and improve their biological terrain immunologically and within their microbiome. Also, when we think of the biological terrain, we're also thinking of it in a non-physical way. And what I mean by that is that's also the psycho-emotional component. So if we're stressed, if we're traumatized, if we watch too much news that is constant, like many people do, that puts them in a state of fear, then that's also going to affect their biological terrain. So we don't think of it as only just pH and toxins from the environment. We have to also think of it in terms of the psycho-emotional toxicity that we can incorporate into our bodies that can cause problems as well. So it's important to try to clean our mind and to maintain a positive place in our mind, to always to laugh more, to have joy in our life, and to not be so fear-based. To have faith really is that things are in a more positive place. And I think that as we become more stressed, and this definitely has been shown to cause an immunological deficiency. So we want to think of it in both terms, in both the physical as well as the non-physical. So we have a non-physical terrain too.
Yeah, and for people that like to just say, well, can this be proven? It absolutely can. So when you look at the nervous system and how it affects the endocrine system and how that affects then the immune system, it's very clear in our nervous system. If you look at the human body, and one of the best pictures I've ever seen is the actual nervous system of the human body. And I try to show people it as often as I can, because basically you have this brain, and then it comes down and it looks like a tree, essentially an upside down tree. And you're looking at all the nerves touching every cell and everything in the body. And what happens is when you are stressed, you're tense. And it leads to a slowing of the thyroid. It leads to a slowing of digestion. And it's very systematic. And so however you like to look at it, there is a vibrational being, there's an energetic being, and there's also the physical being. And if you only want to look at it the physical side, that's okay as well. But there is a clear path to being shut down. And a lot of people they immediately dismiss pH. But what they don't understand is that we're not always talking about pH of just the blood. We're not talking about that 7.356, that delicate balance. And yes, it could go up to about 7.5, and yes, it can go down to 7.2. But there's also what it takes in order to keep the blood at that 7.356. Your body has to use a lot of buffering agents if you have more of an acid-based, let's just even say lifestyle, not just nutrition, but stress. All of these things can lead to additional acids, too much workouts, too much, etc. So I like to let people know that yes, your body does a good job at buffering acids, but also there's different acid in the stomach. There's different levels of acidity in the intestines. There's different levels in the tissues. And in conventional medicine, well, you really only look at the blood pH. And when the tissues are off, well, now you're talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. You're not able to use oxygen to the same degree. You're working more of an anaerobic-based metabolism. And these are all things that bioregulatory medicine really talks about as well, that conventional medicine pretty much completely overlooks.
Yes. Well, back to this idea of that, how the mind affects the body. It's been shown in studies that the peptides of tears of joy are different than the peptides of tears of sadness. And so this is to say, when we emote, that we create chemicals in our body. And this is very proven. So it's beyond a doubt, the whole world of psychoneural immunology expounds this idea that the mind is connected to the body. And so, of course, the ancients knew this in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and that those are mind-body medicines, and have always looked at it together. Never did they separate it.
That's right. And Ayurveda has 8 branches, and it has all those different branches for a reason. You're looking at yogic-based traditions, movement, you're looking at the body. And so that is why I just think that no medicine is really complete in and of itself. But when you take them all together, then you can say, okay, when we need to look at the whole person, there's multiple modalities this person can use. They could take something from all of the different technological based devices. They could use meditation and yoga from thousands of years ago. They could use acupuncture. And that's really how I prefer to really work with people in my practice. And I know that you do the same because it's what's best for the individual that you're working with. And that's really what it's all about.
Yes.
I'd love to talk a little bit more now too about, I want to go into a little bit more the Bioregulatory Medicine Institute and then speak about the book that you didn't just write it, but I'm talking about it now over the past couple of months on my podcast and why I consider it kind of the go-to now all-in-one, all-encompassing information source for breast-based cancer. So let's talk about first Bioregulatory Medicine Institute, and then I'd love to talk about your book.
Well, BRMI, Bioregulatory Medicine Institute, was founded 3 years ago. It's a nonprofit organization. It's a non-commercial organization, and it's just about information. And so we have a website, which is really a database. You go brmi.online, brmi.online, and you'll come to this website, which is very extensive. It goes into the basic diagnostics and therapeutics of bioregulatory medicine, the history, a lot of the pioneers. We have a news section. We try to keep current with a lot of articles, and we're always adding to it. Now, we also have a YouTube site and post different types of videos that we have filmed, like in Baden-Baden in Medicine Week, as well as with other conferences that's posted there. We also have a e-journal that we publish twice every other month, and that's free. All of this is free. There's no cost to anyone to go to the website or to get the e-journal or in any way. And we're not selling anything, so there's no pop-ups for that. So we're really trying to be more of an informational-based institute. And we put on conferences and workshops as well. We have a podcast. It's hosted by Dr. Sharon Stills, who's a naturopath in Arizona. And that's a weekly podcast. And so you could visit that as too. And then we also are on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. Unfortunately, social media has put us in Facebook jail for some of the things that we posted. But we still, are in the trenches and doing our best to get the word out and to stay uncensored. Unfortunately, in this age and time, recently that many doctors and scientists and people have been censored. And so we've been kind of among that group, but we're still on the forefront and want to put out the words that we best can and inform the public about the science of self-healing. So BRMI, we invite you to come to the website, to like us on social media, to sign up for the free e-journal, and to listen to the podcast. And so that is really kind of where BRMI is right now. I have been with it. I'm the executive and medical director of it, and have been with it since the very beginning. And it's growing. We're growing in popularity slowly, but we had about 17,000 visits to our website last month, and I think that was pretty good as a new young institute. And we're hoping that things will continue to grow and that we'll be continue to be able to really inform the public of what bioregulatory medicine is, the diagnostics and therapeutics and the like.
And this is essentially, you've developed the US chapter where first it was in Germany or Switzerland. And then this is basically for all of the people who don't necessarily speak German, like myself, you're able to connect with a lot of bioregulatory practitioners there. You're able to learn more about bioregulatory medicine. And what I'll say about social media as well, because I'm in that same jail right now, and I have been since March, where my views. I mean, like literally it's 10% of what it used to be. That's all that it is. I haven't done anything different except I started talking about the virus and different natural-based modalities, but people can still find us, meaning you have to now look. I'll never show up in your feed anymore, but you can go and you can find Bioregulatory Medicine Institute, BRMI. You can find myself, and you partner with a lot of great organizations like the IAOMT, I believe, for dental. I've been talking about them forever too, because they're a group of people around the world that are really dedicated to not using fluoride or mercury or a lot of these harmful based toxins that, again, affect your thyroid and affect the regulatory systems of the body. So again, it's not about, this is a nonprofit, this is about teaching, this is about helping people, and also connecting with a lot of great practitioners out there. And like you said, all those great free YouTube videos. So I invite people to check that out. If you have anything else to add, definitely feel free to do so. I'm over, I think one or two of my podcasts actually on homotoxicology are actually over there. So we'll try to link up to that on the website. But I want to talk about too, and spend a little bit of time on this. You wrote really an 800-page book on breast cancer called The Rest of the Story. And this is a well-referenced, really well-thought-out book. And one of the reasons why I very much enjoyed this book is that it was, well, of course, well-researched, but it's in electronic format, so PDF format. So I could say, okay, I want to go right to chapter 6, and I want to go right to this particular part, and you hyperlink right there. So it's not difficult to read at all. You can read it cover to cover, or you can go through the sections that you like. And I found it, again, a really enjoyable read. And really, I would say, all-encompassing. So if you are looking to learn more about breast cancer, especially if it's in your family, it's in your family history, this is a great book to check out. And I'd love to hear a little bit more why you chose this particular health topic, since there's so many health-based issues, and why you spend so much time researching this.
Well, this started about 15 years ago. Of course, as I know, you see patients with breast cancer that come to you and are looking for information. And I would give information to them, maybe like 2 or 3 pages of information, and I realized that was woefully inadequate. So then I created like a page, maybe about 10 or 15 pages of information, and I thought that would be helpful to them. And I realized that was still woefully inadequate, and that this is such a huge, huge topic. So I thought, I'm just going to write a book. And I started writing it, and I couldn't put it down. The information was so fascinating to me. So it became encyclopedic, actually. It became not just about the origins of breast cancer, but also the diagnostics, the conventional therapeutics, the bioregulatory medicine approaches towards it, which are a lot of traditional, like Chinese medicine approaches and Ayurvedic medicine approaches. And so it took a long time to put all that together, but it was really a passion for me, and I worked on it every day. And finally, it came to fruition, and I put it out there, as you say, in an electronic format. And the electronic format allows me to change it a little bit every year. So as statistics come in, as new things come in, I can easily change that. And so it makes it where I can redo it and add to it. Which I think is good to be able to do. Whereas if it's printed in a printed text, it's you have to reprint a new edition. So that was the whole idea behind it, is that I really just wanted to empower women and families that are experiencing this problem or want to prevent breast cancer. And so that is what it is. It's a book of empowerment. And I think that knowledge is empowerment. So many people that come to me, they talk to their oncologist or their oncological nurses, and they don't really get the full story. They are not getting all of the details that they need to know in order to really survive it. And this is a book of survival. It's really a survival text. And that's why I wrote it. I thought that there needs to be a lot more information included. And many of the books out there just didn't serve that. that they were incomplete. And so I thought, I'm just going to have to write it myself, and it's going to be a long, long text, but it'll all be there. And of course, it would be hard to, as you said, to read it from front to back. It's really more designed to read it in chapters and to look into different areas of it that your interest that you're interested in.
Yeah, and in that book, you do provide essentially the origins, conventional medicine, treatment-based protocols, what to look for, and then you also provide natural-based protocols as well. So there is a little something for everyone in there, and then, of course, it's well-researched and backed up with these particular studies. So that is one thing, again, that I like about it, because I want people to know, too, that conventional medicine does not hold all of the keys to research, that much of what we do in natural health, if not the majority of what we do, is actually clinically researched, and there's published studies on it, too. It's just going at it from a very different perspective, where the body really hasn't messed up. It's become overwhelmed. It can't deal with the toxicities that it's been exposed to and the deficiencies that it's lacking. But if we can begin to really give that heroic push back and help the body out, well, then you do have that potential to heal. And that's really what I try to share with people every day. And I know that you do the same.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you mentioning the book. I do. Did enjoy writing it, and I think that it is a very empowering book for all women and for people that are dealing with it, families that are dealing with it, breast cancer, or just want to prevent it. So this is something you can go breastcancertherestofthestory.com. That's breast cancer, the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey, for those of you that remember Paul Harvey. .com, and you can find it there. There's a website designated for that book, but it's also on Amazon, Breast Cancer, the Rest of the Story. So you can get it from Amazon as well.
And like we just said, it's a downloadable book, so you can start using it that very same day, which is a great thing as well. So anything else that you'd like to add that you think may be useful for our listeners on bioregulatory medicine, or what you have going on and BRI-MI is doing as well?
Well, I just appreciate people that would come to the website and search it out, and then contact me. And if they want to share articles or information with me, I really invite that. That BRMI has an advisory board, and you're one of our advisors. And it's an advisory board of about 30 different doctors throughout the world. A lot of them are European, and that we try to put information onto the website, but we also need our viewers to help us with that. And so if you know of something, then please do share it. And that could either be put into our e-journal, or it could be put into our social media pages, or even uploaded to the website. So I would like our viewer audience to participate and to join our tribe, so to speak, as much as you can. So please do feel like if you want to join in and share some information that you may have, then that would be great.
And I'm going to mention this to our IHPs at the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute as well, since we have many practitioners there that are well-versed in different forms of integrative health, different types of medicine. So for sure, I think they'll be able to contribute as well. I appreciate you being on the show here today. Love being able to chat bioregulatory medicine. Very few people speak the same language, but it's always great to be able to catch up.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And this is kind of an interesting day today, but I really have enjoyed this interview very, very much.
Excellent. Thank you again. And we will provide all the show note links today over on the podcast. So feel free to head on over. We'll link up BRMI. We'll link up Dr. Odell's book and everything else right there. So hopefully you enjoy the show, and we'll be back tomorrow. Speak with you then.
Thank you so much.